There is a time to do thoroughly edited, thematically based video essays about the movies that I watch and report them back to you. This isn't one of those times. This is What I Remember, and it's a series where I watch movies half distracted. Maybe my baby's being fussy, wife keeps sending me downstairs to restock snacks and wine. Maybe I myself am inebriated and checked out from the boring ass plot. Who knows? But I watch the movie, let it marinate for 24 hours, and then I report back to you, the viewer, with screenshots of my flawed memories of the plot and my gut interpretation of the movie as a whole. Does this have any value to you? You be the judge. I would say there's spoilers in this, but there's like a 40% chance that anything I say is correct anyways. So let's go. Today I am poorly summarizing MaXXXine, the third installment in the X series from A24 featuring Mia Goth. Now, we watched this because my wife specifically is a huge Mia Goth fan. I mean, I'm the horror nut that likes all the real practical effects and she tolerates that shit. But for whatever reason, she globbed onto the X series. She absolutely loved Pearl. She even liked Infinity Pool, which is like a low dose acid trip of a movie. It has that kind of weird nonsensical element that a lot of A24 movies have. So when we found out that this movie existed in the first place and was actually streaming this weekend, we decided to make a mom and dad date night of it. So we got little baby Teddy drunk on formula, made sure he was down for the count. We got our snacks. This time it was a berry pie from Sprouts with French vanilla ice cream, a couple of craft beers, and my wife even treated herself to wine out of the bottle, not a box. I mean, who needs a vacation to the Bahamas, am I right? The movie starts out with kind of a creepy black and white family homemade movie of some girl looks like in the 50s, talking about how she's not going to settle for a life she doesn't deserve, and she's being prompted by the man behind the camera, who we hope is a caregiver of some sort, and it hints at a very kind of creepy dysfunctional relationship between them that obviously gives rise to the character that we know. The movie then goes to familiar territory with the protagonist trying out for a movie role, being very upfront about her history as a porn star, and then doing what the boss girls do and just absolutely nailing it. Now, when she gives the reading that undoubtedly is going to secure her the role, she walks outside and we get a feel of her character as she confidently tells all the girls that are lined up that they might as well go home because she fucking nailed it. Now, I gotta pause because at this point in the movie, I mean, we're just into the beginning, I had realized that I haven't seen X or Pearl since they came out. It actually took me a minute to realize that this was the girl from X, because it had been so long since I seen it. I didn't remember her name was MaXXXine, and because it took place in a different timeline, and Pearl and X were based off two different characters, both played by Mia Goth, I was like, oh, it makes sense. This would be a third character in a third timeline. It's not just that this is how little I pay attention, it's that this is how comfortable I am filling in the gaps with my completely flawed Swiss cheese of a memory. I warned you. None of this is a factual account of what's actually in this movie. So I get this aha moment. My brain immediately starts to go back to the occurrences in the first one. They start doing some flashbacks in the movie, showing her going through her trauma. X was like a 70s slasher movie. Takes place in the 70s. They're porn stars. They're at this ranch. And the creepy old couple that runs the ranch starts killing them, I think. And then Mia Goth's character is the only one that gets away. The thing that stands out from X is the mystery, because the old woman in her younger pictures looks exactly like the young girl in X. And then they go on to make the movie Pearl about the coming of age story of this psychotic old woman that has the exact same story as MaXXXine, wanting to be famous at all costs and killing anybody that she thinks is in her way. And that's a mystery that grabs you because you're looking for an explanation, and it's presented in this kind of A24, this doesn't make sense, but we're not going to explain it to you kind of way. So then you're left looking for that satisfaction. Like, is this something that exists in universe that we're going to find an explanation for? Or is it just symbolism where the young starlet who's selling her body out eventually comes to recognize herself in the ugly old formation of a psychotic narcissist who did all kinds of horrible things for the pursuit of fame and recognition? Or is it just another way for A24 movies to be fucking weird without having to be on the hook for explaining the weirdness? Now, I was interested in the answer to that, but MaXXXine absolutely ditches that mystery, so I have to believe that if the creators of the movie didn't really care to follow up on it, it was probably a shallow bit of mystery bait that they threw in the beginning and didn't really know what to do with later on. So MaXXXine gets the role to this horror sequel, and then they end up showing news clips of what's going on in the area around the time in the 80s. They keep referencing the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, and then I just kind of tuned out. Probably the next half hour was random clips of MaXXXine like sleeping on a couch, talking to other sex workers. There's her dancing at a club while a guy behind a screen with black gloves, you don't see his face, he's like freaking out at the sight of seeing her dancing and like breaks the ledge. The big mystery is, of course, who this guy is, what's he up to, what does he want? And then we get the first thing that captures my attention, which in these movies is always the horrible, deplorable, senseless violence. We get a guy following her menacingly down an alleyway, making threats as he's holding out a knife, and she's running scared, runs into a fence, she can't like climb over, she can't get past. You think, oh my god, MaXXXine's in trouble. And then of course she does the boss bitch thing, which sets the theme for the entire movie. She turns around, pulls out a gun. This is the different type of movie. This is, I'm not going to be victimized. Been there, done that. And she takes the scene for what is kind of a, I guess, cathartic moment for women who have been victimized. I mean, it gets bad. She makes him blow the gun and there's like technique involved. And then she makes him strip down and lie face down. And given that she was a porn star, I guess the person who's literally being fucked by guys on camera for money and probably metaphorically being fucked by all the producers, I thought, hey, it'd be suiting for her to like fuck this guy with the gun. That seems like it would fit thematically. And I wasn't ready for that, but what they gave us instead, I really wasn't ready for. As the man lies face down, scared and naked, with his balls wedged between the concrete and his butt cheeks, she takes her hard heel, smashes them into the ground, and it's shown. There's real effects here. There's corn syrup and paper mache, or I don't know, bits of fucking pork fat, whatever they got to mimic the sight of smashed testicles on the concrete. My wife actually looked at me in a rare moment of sympathy and said, that made my stomach hurt. But I also got a sense of like what The Boys and Generation V does, where the writers insist on mutilating dicks every chance they get. I mean, she was basically holding the gun, screaming, women, as she smashed the guy's balls into the ground. So at this point, I'm trying to wrap my head around the different tone of this movie compared to the others, because it's not feeling like an actual horror movie. The next thing I remember at this point is Kevin Bacon. Wait, was that Kevin Bacon? Kevin Bacon hasn't done a lot recently. He's a lot older than when I used to see him regularly on my multiple rewatches of my parents' VHS copy of Wild Things. This guy in the movie is a private investigator and he had a mustache and glasses. I'm like 99.8% sure that was Kevin Bacon. Anyways, he's hired by some employer. You don't know who it is. And he was hired to track down MaXXXine, and he harasses her for a bit throughout the movie. The next thing I remember is her taking her keys in her fist, doing the Liam Neeson thing from The Gray, where he's got the broken bottle, he's about to fight the wolf, and he's sitting in his car and she's just like teeing off on his face. And we got boss bitch moment number 2. Then the next time I come to, her and a couple of her buddies, one of whom is Gus Fring, who's supposed to be, I think, her lawyer or her agent or something. She gets them to like beat the guy up and then puts him in a car smasher, and we get to see a side view as the car slowly gets compressed to nothing, with probably Kevin Bacon flailing around pleading for his life. And then we get to see the comical amount of blood that pours out of the vehicle. I mean, it's like when you break a fish tank. It was just overflowing right as you see the last bit of life squished out of the private investigator. And at this point, intermittently, people MaXXXine knows are getting killed, but they're not people you know or give a shit about. I mean, MaXXXine's life is like literally never in jeopardy, just everybody else around her. So jumping through to the end, the mystery of the guy with the black gloves, this is the real spoiler. I'm going to tell you at least who I remember this guy as being. But remember, you take everything I say with a grain of salt. It is her dad. That's right. It's the creepy guy behind the camera from the beginning who was filming her as a young child, coaching her on how to never settle for a life that she doesn't deserve. Turns out he's a pastor and he ran a congregation, and he got a bunch of his followers to head out to Hollywood to protest the evils of the sinful system that exists that's stealing their children. So he captures MaXXXine and he's filling her in on his grand plans to give her what she wants and make her a big star. He's going to feature her as a propaganda piece in his movie about how the system is stealing everybody's kids. Now, I didn't like this bit at all because this was like the biggest tonal departure in my opinion. On paper, it made sense because you would think like the boisterous type of performative pastor would have a lot of the same qualities that MaXXXine and Pearl were supposed to have. For one, being a fame-hungry snake, and on the other hand, having the capability of putting out those really animated over-the-top performances. But tonally, I felt it was really inconsistent. It was campy. It wasn't frightening. It wasn't disturbing. It lacked so much of like what made the first two movies kind of really hit home. This was just a guy with some followers and some guns. His tie to MaXXXine was deep, but it wasn't really explored at all. and the best he could do was be a threat of physical violence. But even the fact that they were like using guns, there's a big shootout at the end. When I think of this franchise, I think of the beauty of Mia Goth's long, slow zoom monologue in Pearl. I mean, that sticks with me to this day. And the tone of it, the delivery, the subtext of the dysfunction in that character, it has a realism to it, even though it's a very dramatic, over-the-top performance. But this, it felt cartoony, it felt campy. Now, I wonder for a minute if these differences were intentional, because this felt more like a grindhouse action movie. Even with the shootout at the end, it felt like a Hollywood action flick. I mean, it had them running through like Universal Studios, the set to Back to the Future, the Norman Bates house. So it could be that they didn't want this to feel anything like the first two, but it didn't land with me. Now, the movie finishes with her doing yet another boss bitch scene where she was never really in danger and she holds all the cards, where dad's on the ground, she's got a shotgun, and she absolutely blows him to shit. Then she ends up getting everything she wants. Her life is being made into a movie because she captured this guy who was killing people. I want to say they did a Tarantino history retcon and made this guy the Night Stalker, but I'm not sure if that's true. I was too uninterested to ask my wife. But anyway, she's the hero. She's on the red carpet getting interviewed, and she goes on to have an acting career and get everything she wants in the world. So wrapping up this thing, my takeaway. I got small bits of glee from the violence, the really over-the-top gore that makes your stomach turn is what attracts me to horror movies, and I'm fine seeing horror movies that have absolutely no substance to them whatsoever. I always grade things harshly if they're sequels that came after something really creative, new, and great, and they fall short, or if they had the makings of something really great and fell short. And this is that movie. You know what it could have been, because X was really entertaining and new and refreshing. Pearl took it up a notch. This was a few steps backwards. So I spent most of the movie looking for a connection between X, which showed a young starlet being haunted, menaced by this decaying, ugly corpse that she recognized as herself, who was similarly this attention-seeking psychopath. And then seeing that through with Pearl, which was an extraordinarily well-done origin story. But the disjointed feeling I get from the surface level plot of MaXXXine and how it's supposed to connect to those themes, either A, it means I didn't get it, which isn't just possible, it's likely. We've been over this. Or B, it means that the writers, the creative team, actually didn't have the tightly woven narrative structure underneath this story arc figured out. It's just like world building with fantasy stuff. They say you need like an iceberg. Like for a sci-fi epic, you don't actually need to have a language written out for all the characters. You don't actually have to have all their religions, all their politics, all their history worked out. You just need an iceberg. You need something on top that suggests that all that underneath, the stuff you can't see, has been figured out. And I find in too clever properties like this, oftentimes people get really good at portraying the mystery that suggests that they have all the answers, and oftentimes it's anything but. All you really got to do is have some quotes, you got to have some cryptic messaging, you got to have some plot holes or bits of nonsense that obviously don't make sense, and then you just let the Reddit fan theorists connect the dots for you, and voila, your universe is complete. For it to be a good horror movie, there would have had to be some immediate threat to her at any point, or some bits of suspense, and that didn't really exist in the movie at all. For it to be a good grindhouse action movie, or some type of revenge porn like I Spit on Your Grave, you would have to relate to the character, what they're trying to do, the injustice they're trying to correct. And because she's just a narcissistic, attention-driven starlet, we don't really get any of that either. Maybe it's a character-driven drama with deep thematic themes regarding fame and attention and where it comes from, what motivates people to do that, when does it go too far. She said repeatedly through the movie, you gotta do whatever it takes to get your dreams, but it didn't show any lesson being learned about the cost of that, and it didn't show a negative character arc where she doubled down and ended up paying the price. She just wins from the start and seems to get mostly what she wants throughout the movie. Not to say you need any of those things checked off to have a really good, enjoyable, violent movie on a Sunday night with your baby asleep in the crib and your wife drunk on wine. And for that reason, this movie, it's probably going to be somewhat enjoyable to fans of this genre in general. But if you were a fan of the first two and you're looking for some continuity, some delivery on the promises made by the first two, it falls short. It left me with a hole in my heart. And that's part of the reason this is a what I remember and not a long, thoroughly edited video essay on the thematic elements of X, Pearl, and MaXXXine. Regardless, anything with Mia Goth is probably going to be better than anything else you can see, even if I do find her lack of eyebrows unsettling. So guys, that is what I remember from MaXXXine. Hopefully this was of some value to you in some capacity, although I don't see how. Thanks so much for watching. Leave your comments below. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.